All right, so now the question is, can individual health behavior be changed? Well, many preventable diseases in the US and other developed countries are linked to personal behavior. So these include smoking, obesity, injuries, sexual behavior, and drug use. Now, some examples of changes over time, we can start off, say, with smoking. In the 1960s, about 50% of the US population smoked. Now, today, that number has dropped down to just 15%, which shows a significant shift in behavior over time. Then we have seatbelt use. In the 1970s, fewer than 25% of people use seatbelts. Now, today, over 80% of people buckle up regularly. And to take a semi more recent example, COVID-19 and behavioral changes, the pandemic demonstrated how quickly behaviors can change in response to public health concerns. Social distancing, mask wearing, and vaccination rates all increased rapidly. Behaviors on vaccines also did a complete 180. People who were initially anti-vaccine became pro-vaccine, and then some who were pro-vaccine became anti-vaccine. Now this shows how quickly public health behaviors can shift depending on their circumstances. So overall, the takeaway from this is that behavioral change is definitely possible, and these changes can be positive or negative depending on the situation. Now some behaviors are easier to change than others, but it's clear that individual health behaviors can be influenced by social, cultural, and health-related factors. So we know that individual health behaviors can change. How come some are easier to change than others? Well, some health behaviors are easier to change when a behavior can be substituted with a similar one that's more acceptable and convenient. Now, one example of a substitution could be substituting acetaminophen, Tylenol, for aspirin to prevent Ray's syndrome. Because what this is, it's a rare but serious condition that causes confusion, swelling of the brain, and liver damage. Children recovering from a viral infection such as chickenpox or the flu, or a metabolic disorder, they are the most at risk, especially if they've been taking aspirin. So in that regard, that's why a substitution would be needed. And of course, people were able to make the switch more easily because acetaminophen was perceived as safer and more accessible. Now, there's also incentives for behavioral change. These can help accelerate the acceptance of a new behavior, maybe a reduced cost, which makes it easier to afford and adopt a new behavior. There's increased availability of products or services, which encourages people to make the switch. And there's also improvements in the ease of use, which also plays a major role of encouraging behavior changes. Now, say take to the more real world examples. There's going to be easier to install child restraint systems, which have led to significant increase in their use. There's also maybe greater insurance coverage and widespread availability of equipment, which have led to, say, more women getting more mammograms. All these can be good examples. All right, so we know it is possible for individual health behaviors to change, but why are some harder to change? It's because typically the health behaviors that are harder to change, they have a physiological component or they involve addiction. So some examples could be obesity, cigarette smoking, or opioid addictions. These are particularly tough to modify because of their biological and psychological components. And in terms of success rates, individual efforts at quitting smoking or losing weight succeed less than 30% of the time. Even with intensive interventions, the success rate only reaches as high as 50%. As mentioned previously, because these behaviors often involve physical or psychological dependence, that makes the change even harder. And also, there's still some other barriers as well. So even if an individual is highly motivated, physical, social, and economic barriers can make the change difficult. An example of this could be lack of access to healthcare or living in environments where risky behavior is required for survival, which can prevent successful behavior change. All right, now still going on with individual behavior, there are various theories and models designed to help us understand the health behaviors and also how to intervene effectively. Now, an widely used example is what we call the stages of change model, or the trans-theoretical model. And what this model is that it's frequently used in both public health and clinical medicine. It emphasizes that behavior change is a gradual process, rather than something that happens at once. It has a series of few stages as well. starting on which we have the pre-contemplation. Here, the individual is not yet thinking about making a change. Now, with contemplation, this person is aware of the need to change, but hasn't committed to taking action yet. There's preparation, which is where the individual is planning and getting ready to take action soon. Then action is where the person is actively changing their behavior. And finally, we have maintenance, where the individual works to sustain the new behavior over time. Now, one thing though is that this model assumes that change occurs in small incremental steps. Rather than making a dramatic change all at once, individuals move through these stages gradually. All right, so what I have here is table 4.5, which is where we're going to basically use the stages of change model and say the application for trying to quit smoking. So starting off, say, back in the pre-contemplation stage. So remember, this is the first stage where the individual has not yet considered changing their behavior. And so in this stage, efforts to encourage change are often less effective, as the person is not ready to take action. However, this is a good point to begin education and support, which can lay the groundwork for future behavior changes. Then we have the contemplation stage, where the individual is actively thinking about the benefits and barriers to making a change. Information about short and intermediate term gains, or process goals, are particularly useful at this stage. Long-term benefits or the overall product goal are also important to help motivate the person to make the change. It's also important to establish a baseline at this stage to assess the severity of the problem. Essentially, you can almost think of it as like taking a before picture of a 4-cycle workout program, as this helps track progress as they move forward in the process. All right, so now we're on to our third stage of preparation. This is where the individual begins to develop an action plan. The person is now more receptive to setting both short and long-term goals, as well as considering strategies, as well as develop a timetable. Now, as a health professional, it's important to assist with preparing for unanticipated barriers, as this will help the person stay on track. So unfortunately, life does happen, so you need to be ready for that. Then, of course, we have our action stage, or fourth stage. So this is where the individual begins to make actual behavior changes, but less than 6 months of continuous change. So in this stage, it's essential to bring in outside support to reinforce and reward the new behavior. By doing so, we can help the individual maintain their plan and solidify new habits, even when setbacks or challenges arise. Then we have our maintenance stage, the fifth and final phase. So this is where the new behavior becomes a permanent part of the person's lifestyle. So this happens around 6+ months or more, and you tend to continue the change behavior. Now note, at this stage it's important to provide guidance on how to anticipate the long-term nature of the behavior and how to resist the temptation to revert back to old behaviors, or relapse for short. Alright, so now here, how can group and population interventions complement the individual interventions? So while behavior change is often seen as an individual process, it's important to recognize that individual behavior is shaped by group and population influences. So kind of like the socioeconomic factors, for example. As such, interventions targeting groups and populations can reinforce individual interventions and support overall behavior change. So say we're assessing at the individual level, even when focusing on group or population level interventions, we must assess their impacts on individuals to understand how effectively they're driving change. This ensures that group interventions are meaningful and directly contribute to individual behavior changes. Now, as a health professional, you can apply the stages of change model to group and population intervention levels at each stage of the process. Now, combining individual interventions with group and population strategies has been shown to be the most successful approach in situations like smoking cessation. So for instance, no single intervention, whether individual, group, or population level based, is effective on its own. Instead, combined approaches work best when trying to change smoking behavior. So examples of these can be cigarette taxation, smoking restrictions, and the negative social perception of smoking all reinforce one another. And these combined strategies make it easier for individuals to progress from the pre-contemplation stage to the contemplation stage, and so on, helping them move through the stages of change more effectively. So in essence, these interventions create an environment that supports behavior change at both the individual and societal levels. All right, now here we'll be touching on different theories for behavioral change, since there are a wide range of theories developed to explain human behavior and its change. And these theories operate at different levels, such as intrapersonal, interpersonal, and population and community. And we'll look at a few of these key theories that are widely used in public health and behavior change. First, we have the intrapersonal theories, which these theories focus on the individual and factors such as knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, motivation, self-concept, past experiences, and skills. Well, in here we have the health belief model, or HBM, which is a widely used intrapersonal theory, which suggests individuals will change their behavior if they believe the condition has serious consequences, they believe taking action will benefit them, with benefits outweighing the harms. They are exposed to factors that prompt action, and they believe in their ability to perform the action successfully. Next up, we have our interpersonal theories, which these theories take into account the influence of other people, such as family, peers, coworkers, and healthcare providers. In this, we have the theory of planned behavior, which is a commonly used theory in this category, which proposes that the behavior intention is influenced by how others important to the individual perceive this behavior, whether they see it as good or bad. And then there's the individual's beliefs about the control over the behavior. Finally, at the population/community level theories, these theories explore social systems and focus on changing factors within those systems to improve health at a community level. Now we have the diffusion of innovation theory, which is widely used and suggests that the adoption or rejection of innovation is influenced by several factors, including relative advantage, is it better than what it replaces? Compatibility, does it fit with the values and needs of the intended audience? Complexity, is it easy to understand and use? Then there's trial ability, can we try it before fully adopting it? Then observability, are the results observable and measurable? So those are all factors you need to keep in mind. All right, so now what are some effective principles for influencing the individual behaviors? To start off, we have something called behavioral economics, which is an emerging field that uses new insights into human behavior to understand the actions of both clinicians and patients. And these insights help us understand how to design interventions that are more effective at encouraging behavior change. These new understandings/insights also include, starting off with, is losses looming larger than gains. Because research shows that losses are perceived as more impactful than equivalent gains, which means incentive systems are more effective when individuals see the incentive as a way to avoid a loss rather than just gain something. So an example of this could be avoiding a penalty can motivate people more than the possibility of earning a reward. Then there's just-in-time reminders, which are reminders delivered just before the desired behavior is about to occur and are highly effective. So examples include reminding people to wash their hands or encouraging elevator users to take the stairs, which are small interventions that can have a big impact. Third, we also have default choices that are usually retained. People tend to stick with the default option when making their choices, even if they have the option to change. So this principle can be used to influence behavior by making the desired behavior the default choice. So say an example, automatically enrolling individuals into wellness programs unless they opt out, or use the elevator as an example. Say once you start taking the stairs, you usually stop considering the elevator. Then fourth, we have what we call creating new habits. Since creating and reinforcing new habits is crucial for long-term behavior change. Apps that provide reminders to take medication, exercise, or engage in other routine behaviors can be effective in helping individuals establish and maintain new habits. All right, so now another method we could use is marketing principles and how those can be used to change behavior. Because in recent years, public health has begun focusing on marketing approaches to better understand and change health behaviors of groups of people. Social marketing is an extension of traditional product marketing to change the health behaviors and has become a key component of the public health approach. Now, some successful social marketing campaigns, we have Say the Truth, which is aimed to change the perception of smoking, shifting it from a rebellious act to a decision to reject the influence of big corporations and behavior controlling products, though ironically still being rebellious in the end. Then you have the National Youth and Drug Campaign, or NY80. So here, this is directed at both parents and young people, encouraging them to avoid drug use. Then you have the Verb campaign, which is focused on what we call the tweens group, so ages 9 to 13. They're aiming to make exercise fun and cool for all kids, not just athletes. Now, for social marketing, it is evolved around the four P's, which are still commonly used in traditional marketing. Starting off, you have your product. You're identifying the behavior or innovation being marketed. Then for price, you have to recognize the barriers, the benefits, and the costs of the behavior change. Then for place, you identify the target audience and the best ways to reach them. Then finally, you have promotion. You organize a campaign that will effectively communicate the message to the desired audience. Note social marketing relies heavily on branding, using symbols and words that resonate with a specific target audience. Branding helps identify and connect the specific audience with the message being pitched. It involves a clear understanding of the behavior or product and strategies to reduce the financial and psychological costs for the audience. And so the ultimate goal is to segment the audience and determine how to reach each group effectively. So here you can see how branding is seen as a method of strengthening the promotion, building on the first three P's to ensure a cohesive and impactful message. All right, so now what role can education play in vaccine acceptance? First, you need effective communication. So to encourage vaccine acceptance or acceptance of any behavior, it's crucial to communicate accurate information effectively. So here you want to focus on positive messages that highlight benefits while being honest about potential harms. Kind of almost relating to the four P's on the last slide a little bit. You also want to avoid judgmental messages like you're killing people or you should get vaccinated because it's the right thing to do. They're less effective. Then you have some key principles for the effective communication. Thanks to the National Academy of Sciences, they outlined a series of principles for effective communication. First off, don't wait. You need to start communicating immediately. Once those attitudes are formed, it becomes much harder to change someone's mind. The next, you need to be consistent and transparent. Maintain transparency about the vaccination process, including authorization, research, and the distribution process. This helps build trust and address concerns about politicization or corruption. So an example of this could be the initial decision by the FDA to keep COVID-19 vaccine data sealed for 75 years, because that raised public concerns about transparency that was lacking. The next up, you need to be clear and accessible. Use jargon-free messages that are tailored to the health literacy level of your audience. Avoid technical or complex language that could confuse or alienate people. You need to ensure that your message is clear and easy to understand. Also express empathy and respect. Don't dismiss concerns, as doing so can make people feel unheard. People are more likely to participate if they feel their concerns are acknowledged. And even if the concern is based on misinformation, it's important to address it with empathy and respect. Acknowledging while there is no conclusive research, the concern is not entirely unfounded. Finally, acknowledge uncertainty and manage expectations. It's essential to acknowledge uncertainty in situations where there are gaps in knowledge. Don't over-reassure people or make promises you can't keep. Overpromising can undermine trust when reality doesn't align with those promises. All right, so now going further on this topic of vaccine acceptance. So what do you do if education alone is not enough? So note, while education remains the most important method for encouraging vaccine acceptance, additional options must be considered if education alone is not enough to change behavior. So starting off with, we have our motivation strategies, which can be broken down into our incentives. So many vaccinations are provided free of charge, which can be an incentive in itself. Additional incentives can include things like lotteries, offering free gifts, or employer-based incentives. Then you also have your financial rewards, which payments could be considered to encourage vaccination, though larger amounts may be required for behavior change. You also can adopt a no-fault financial system, where individuals who experience side effects receive financial support without having to go through the court system, as another possible strategy. Then easy availability is also key, making vaccinations widely accessible, including through multiple locations. Then finally, you got paid time off from work, which could further motivate individuals to get vaccinated. Then our next area is obligation strategies, starting with which we have mandates. There have been efforts to legally enforce vaccination through mandates. This approach, although controversial, was an important tool in achieving universal vaccination. For example, requiring vaccination for entry into K-12 schools and higher education has helped get the least at-risk populations vaccinated. And third, we have our innovation strategies. Starting off with, we can have an innovative vaccine delivery methods. So beyond the traditional vaccine injection, which is an innovation in itself, other innovations are being explored to increase vaccine acceptance, such as oral pills or nasal sprays. While these methods can make the vaccine more acceptable to the public, they require research and time and cannot be relied on as short-term methods. All right, so now what I have here is table 4.7, which is outlines examples of different approaches that can be used to encourage vaccine acceptance. So most of the examples described on the last line. Now here it provides practical applications of the motivational, obligational, and innovative strategies that we discussed, showing how each option can be implemented to achieve greater vaccine uptake.